Campside Media.
Hey, Campside listeners. Welcome back to Inside the Tent, our series where we go behind the microphone of our hit podcasts, old and new, and talk to the people who brought them to life. I'm Josh Dean, one of the co-founders at Campside Media, and a voice you might recognize from some of our other shows, as well as a few previous Inside the Tent episodes. Today I'm talking to a much more familiar voice, the former co-host of NPR's Morning Edition, David Greene, about our show Reign of Error, which came out back in 2023. Reign of Error was a very fun 5-episode journey into the story of James Dolan and his tumultuous ownership of the New York Knicks. It was not an easy show to find a host for, because it turns out people like to go to Madison Square Garden. But David was game, in part because he's not a Knicks fan, and he absolutely nailed the role, sounding both authoritative and hilarious. I'd also like to apologize in advance if hosting this series hurt David's chances of seeing the Rockettes in person, but we all make sacrifices for our jobs. I'd also like to note that I thought I had a decent podcast voice until I heard myself head-to-head with David Greene. If you want more exclusive content or behind-the-scenes anecdotes for shows like Reign of Error, make sure to go to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com. And now, here's David. So is this the first meeting of the people who are banned from Madison Square Garden? Is that what this is?
It feels that way, yeah. I got an invitation to the Sphere in a couple months, and I literally had to tell my cousins, I was like, don't buy me a ticket. Let me get the ticket in case I get rejected at the door and then have to, I don't want you to have to deal with the legal back and forth over getting money back.
You'll be the first of the two of us attending this meeting to test it. I have not gone yet to either to MSG or any of its properties.
Oh, really? This will be the first time? Okay. Do we know the facial recognition is set up at the Sphere?
I don't have any confirmation one way or the other.
Okay.
I would assume because it's like an extremely high-tech thing.
Yeah. Your face shows up literally on the Sphere, like as you're rejected, like your mugshot.
That would be amazing. It like turns red and starts honking like an alarm.
Exactly. The entire city knows that you're now an intruder.
So that's version 2.0.
Yeah.
They're still updating the software.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to get video of myself trying to go in because we need that.
Yeah. On the off chance, or I don't know if it's an off chance. I actually have no idea. Like it would be worth having if they do something, and if they don't, then we'll know we didn't make the enemies list somehow, which is, I guess, he's not as petty as we thought.
Yeah. Do you kind of want to be on the enemies list?
I do.
I know.
Honestly.
I'm going to be disappointed. It makes you feel important. Like if Dolan went after the spouses of people who posted bad shit on Facebook, if we don't hit that threshold, we have to be in that league somehow.
The Girl Scout mom was on the list.
If we're not as important to James Dolan as the Girl Scout mom, then like we're lost. We should go back. We do another show about him and be even nastier.
Season 2.
100%.
So goes without saying that we're talking about Jim Dolan, owner of Madison Square Garden, and I am talking to David Greene, whose voice you might recognize. He used to host a little show. What was that show called?
Morning Edition, little show on NPR.
I think I've heard of it. It was like in some small markets. You truly have one of those voices that I expect people recognize in public. Does it ever happen?
It happens. It's funny. It didn't happen that often when I was just on broadcast. When we started the podcast Up First, that became like addictive listening for a not insignificant number of people. It's funny because when Morning Edition is on, often people are only listening for like 8 or 9 minutes on average in the morning. Up First, it's like every morning they listen to the full thing. So it's like our voices as the host are in people's ears literally every day. So that's when it started. Like I'd be at airport bars and someone would be like, are you on TV or something, or the radio or a podcast? Like they don't know what it is, but when I ask for the check, they hear it and they're like, that dude sounds familiar.
How long were you on the show?
I was on Morning Edition for like a decade.
And NPR for much longer, right?
NPR for 2005 to like 16 years.
Wow.
It's quite a romp.
You obviously left in order to host this podcast, right? I mean,
that was the final reason. It was like the hours were shitty. The Trump presidential years were really hard, but I could have muddled through all of that. But the opportunity to host Reign of Error that was the final thing that was just like, I'm definitely leaving this job.
It's one of those opportunities that you just can't pass up.
Yeah.
Usually, this is a little bit unusual. I think this is the first one I've done with a host who didn't bring the idea to us. We approached you, expecting you, of course, to say, no, because I don't want to alienate this billionaire.
Yeah.
But you seemed happy to do it. So we offered you the opportunity to be the voice of this somewhat contentious, I would not say objective portrayal of, let me rephrase that. It's based on actual reporting, and it is a true story.
Which was important to me. Let's just be clear. That was like spewing lies was not something that interested me in my career, but yeah.
Yeah, it was not fake news, as some people out there like to see. It was an entirely reported, fact-checked biopod almost. For people who haven't listened yet, and hopefully you will go back and listen, it's the story of James Dolan, son of Chuck Dolan, founder of Cablevision, who also owned Madison Square Garden and thus the New York Knicks and the New York Rangers, and for a time, the New York Liberty, which we can briefly say was a complete disaster under Jim Dolan, not surprisingly. And then he sold them off. Actually, during the end of Jim Dolan's ownership of the New York Liberty, they were playing at the Westchester Civic Center or something. They were playing at essentially like a high school gym in Westchester. That's how little he cared about them. So he put them up for sale, and they were gloriously purchased by another, I think, billionaire and his wife on Long Island, who moved them to the Barclays Center, and now they are a spectacular success. They sell out Barclays Arena on a regular basis. They just won the WNBA title. So it's kind of a wonderful story of a team that was completely cursed under Jim Dolan. But it's quite amazing that it feels to me like his life would be so much happier if he just sold the Knicks and made literally billions of dollars in profit, and people wouldn't be screaming at him. Wouldn't he be so much happier just doing anything else? And yet, no. Do you have a theory on why?
I think he's scared of not being in the spotlight. Like, I think going off and just playing music might satisfy him personally, but there's something weird. And maybe it's some daddy issues, like that he's in the spotlight, even for nasty stuff, even for lawsuits. Isn't the Charles Oakley lawsuit is still happening? Like in 2024, he's still dealing with this feud and drama with a former Knick who got kicked out of Madison Square Garden, probably because James Dolan ordered a former player to be kicked out of an arena. But I don't know if he's mad about that kind of attention. I just wonder if he sold the team and sold these venues and just played music. Like there's some ego thing going on. I don't know what you think of this, but there's an Elon Musk quality to him that it's just like, I'm going to be weird and rich. And, whereas Elon is getting involved in politics and, in the car and space world, I think Dolan built that sphere, for example, because he just loves having this statue and monument to himself rising in the desert in Las Vegas. It's so weird. I don't know if he wants to give that up.
He definitely makes himself part of the story in a way that a lot of owners don't. Although we started that franchise owned with the idea that we're in an era where owners now are celebrities, and he's sort of I don't know if he's the biggest example. He's the most interesting example, I think. Like there are other famous owners, but I'm not sure there's one as fascinating and certainly fun to talk about.
Yeah, that honestly is why I'm really glad that you guys decided to make that sort of the opening to get into owned, because there are different layers that you're exploring that you just don't get a chance to do that often. It's like not just the focus on sports owners and that world and the pressures and the celebrity and the relationship with players and coaches and the city that you're in and your responsibility when it comes to civic pride and civic community. All that stuff's fascinating, but it's also like these are really rich people. And we really get to dig into their minds. And I think Dolan was an example of that. And we obviously had fun with it. And it was such a romp and it's entertaining. And I think that's the beauty of it, to really draw people in. Even my wife listened to it, and she does not like sports shows at all and doesn't listen to even that much of what I do. But she really totally got into it just because of the entertainment value. But there's a psychological exploration of wealth that goes on, and being open to loneliness and being open to insecurity when you have that much money and are in a position like that. And I think that's part of what makes it so fascinating.
I should point out that, and I think we say this in the show, and no offense to you, you were not our first choice because we tried to find some people who are actually connected to the world in some way, like former NBA personalities, some sports people. Everybody said no. Not everybody. I think 3 or 4 people, because they were afraid of him. They were either I think in one case, someone said, my son is a fan of, maybe it was the Knicks. I don't know. Some team that I want to be able to take my son to Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Someone else had a relationship with a brand. And so despite him being one of the most loathed people in New York City and the NBA, he has this power over people, which is that he's proven to be vindictive. So I guess I'm working my way around to the question of why were you not afraid of Jim Dolan?
I don't know. I think part of it is I'm a journalist. And so I'm kind of built on this religion of, you tell great stories that are important to people. So my natural inclination would be to say yes. And, I respected the hell out of Campside and Smartless. And it was based on real journalism and reporting. So all of those things were a great draw in addition to it being just a great story. But I think as a journalist, like I'm built on the idea of I will tell an important story whatever risk that brings. But also, Pittsburgh is my team. I'm a Sixers basketball fan, and then I'm Pirates, Penguins, Steelers. If you had asked me to do a show that would have put at risk me being able to go to Steelers or Penguins or Pirates games, like I probably would have declined politely. The calculation was, if I can never get into the Garden and never get into Radio City and never get into Sphere, do I give a shit truly at my core? Is it worth losing that stuff to tell a really good story and learn a shitload of stuff about sports ownership? It was like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, I live in New York City, and I was willing to do it because I should say the podcast was to some extent based on a piece I'd written for Bloomberg Businessweek 5 years ago, I think. That's sort of the foundational reporting and also made me interested in this guy in a way. As I probably said to you at the time, I didn't write the headline. As you know, reporters never do.
Right.
But I think the headline was something like, is James Dolan the worst owner in sports? And I figured at that point, I'm banned, right? So like the podcast isn't going to make my situation worse, but I live in New York City.
You're already fucked as it was, yeah.
I welcome you into the club of people who now likely will not be allowed to see the Rockettes or...
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about you, like what drew you to the story, like as you said, you wrote that piece, but I think in this media world, I don't know, like 10, 20 years ago, I feel like a show that was this mean and funny might have just been dismissed as entertainment. But in our media world today, it's like people are craving important biographical stuff, important storytelling that also entertains, and finding a way to stay true to solid reporting and also be super entertaining to bring people in. It's really just a fascinating balance in the world of media to me today. And I want to believe that we pulled something off that is a good model, because I just think you don't have to be boring to tell stories that are based on facts and truth and reporting. You can have fun, take liberties, entertain, but also do solid reporting. And I think that's a hard thing to do. And it was really fun to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you feel that way. It's a big belief of ours. At Campside, 3 of us who started the company are former magazine journalists, which was always adjacent to the sort of news reporter ethos of we just report. There's no color,
Right.
we can't have a side. Increasingly, I mean, what you're saying is, I think, very true, and I call bullshit on a lot of that. Like, you're allowed to have opinions. You're not allowed to make up facts. You should not manipulate those facts to tell a story that's not true. But there's nothing wrong with shining a spotlight on ridiculous things and making it entertaining. I mean, I'm sure Jim Dolan, if he were on this conversation with us, would say we're mean and it was very pointed and we had a POV. He would say, you wrote a story that was headlined, is James Dolan the worst owner in sports? So, of course, that's your frame. When I wrote that story for Bloomberg, I very much wanted Jim Dolan to participate. In this podcast, same thing. We actually went to him and asked him to sit for interviews. And it wasn't like we excluded certain POVs in order to eliminate any mention that Jim was a wonderful guy or that these stories are taken out of context or these people are lying. They're all true. Of course, when the subject of something contentious chooses not to participate, it means probably most people who are sympathetic to his cause are also not going to participate. Therefore, you end up with a product that is more, on balance, negative than positive. But there's no way that was a hit piece, right? It's just kind of the story of this guy who's been at war with his city for, 20 years now.
Yeah.
We didn't cherry pick those anecdotes. That were all things that happened very publicly. He's going to like, you left out the 4 years when I was a wonderful guy. It's like, did we?
Yeah, happy to have you on to talk about those years if you'd like to, Jim. And there's something about sports when there's a team that a lot of fans are pissed about and it feels like a franchise or a team is not serving the community. Like someone needs to stick up for them. And I think that is part of it. It is okay to have a tone and a mission of sticking up for the fans of the New York Knicks and calling out an owner who doesn't appear to be serving them well and serving the fan base well, even as you do good reporting and tell a story that's absolutely true. But I think that was part of it. It's like the fans deserve better. The city deserves better.
They do. It's one of the most beloved franchises in any sport, certainly in the NBA. I mean, huge and passionate fan base. That one of the reasons I think he's persisted is because of that. It's that it's very hard to get, I think, people to turn their backs on the Knicks. They could be like, this guy sucks, my team sucks, but I love this team, and they'll get back there. And actually, Jalen Brunson dropped in his lap at almost the lowest point. The Knicks had not made the playoffs in, I don't forget how long, a long time. And he was in the news a lot the year before Brunson got here. I think that was when his war with the Girl Scouts and when he wanted to build a new MSG and he was, the taxes and all these things came up. And then Brunson arrives and suddenly the Knicks are very good again. And one thing that did do was take him out of the headlines a lot because the Knicks are good again. He's probably walking around with this little kick in his step.
I don't want to see that, but probably.
Also, the Sphere.
Also, the Rangers. I mean,
I know.
It's good times for Dolan. That's the one thing I wonder, like, do we basically made a mockery of the Sphere. And every time I see people loving on the Sphere, I'm like, shit, I don't know. The thing was so ridiculous. And the story in that episode is just crazy, asinine stuff. And yet this thing, it seems to be doing well. Maybe it's going to like collapse and fall apart structurally on Thursday, but people seem to really like it.
No, I remember, so Rex Chapman, who was the host of the weekly series who was at one point going to be the voice of this and then just decided he didn't want to do it either because he had
among the 8,000 people who said no before he came to me.
He now works with the Phoenix Suns, so he was like, that would be bad for me. Fair enough. I remember when Rex went to the Sphere, he's not a big fan of Jim Dolan. I don't think he would be upset with me for saying that. He was like, I got to say, man, it's pretty fucking awesome. And he didn't even go to a show. He just went and like sat in the audience. I think Darren Aronofsky made a film for it. Mm-hmm. And he's just like, it's mind-blowing. And then, of course, my brother, friends, everyone's gone. Everyone went to see you too, and they all came back talking about it like a spiritual experience. Yeah. So I'm like, I guess he was vindicated to some extent because we told the story of that thing potentially being a white elephant, right? And all the things said were true. It was way over budget, and there was all kinds of fighting going on. But it worked, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. Is it a financial success? We'll find out.
Yeah, that's the big question.
And you'll tell us. I think either if you do or don't kicked out, we're going to have to do a part 2 of this. We're going to have you back on to say, tell us the story. And by the way, I'm totally willing. We are not biased here. I'm happy for the Sphere to be a wonderful experience for people who go to it because I think the world is terrible. And if you can lose yourself in this crazy immersive experience, that's a good thing.
And I am prone to love it. Like I am such a Vegas guy. Like I just love and it's so Vegas. It's big and flashy, and I don't know. I'm terrified that I'm gonna not just love it, but then be the one to call everyone in my friend group and be like, "This is the most amazing thing ever." So there is some falling on sword with that episode, but it was really fun to talk about it being a complete, utter disaster that went $8 bazillion over budget and was just absolutely strange and weird. So people should still listen to that episode. It will make you laugh and feel like you are curious about this bizarre thing, and then you can go love it.
We ended the series with, I think it was Michael Rappaport, on essentially a tirade, because I believe Michael Rappaport has been banned for life from MSG, still loves the Knicks. And he said, essentially, I hope the Knicks win a championship, and if they do, he's going to be the first owner to get booed on his own floor. Right. He's probably right.
He's probably right. But did you hear that? Rappaport's banned forever from MSG? I do want that. I want that tagline.
Is it you, Oakley, Rappaport?
Yeah.
Probably me.
Josh and David. Yeah.
And that Girl Scout mom?
And the Girl Scout mom.
It's like a murderer's row of villains right there.
Yeah. We should all get together and do lunch sometime and toast like right outside the garden.
Yeah, and we'll just have a reunion every year. We'll go to the Sphere and sit outside.
And hang out and chill. The Girl Scout mom, did we talk to her in the show?
No, we did. We told the story, and there was audio of her talking to the...
Yeah, that's a great one. That's really good.
That's the kind of thing where you're like, oh, if this was scripted, that's too on the nose. Like, it couldn't be the Girl Scout mom.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, obviously, like you brought me in to host it. You guys wrote it, but it just feels like thank you, James Dolan, for living a story that almost writes itself because it was so absurd. I think that's the beauty of some of the show. The writing was phenomenal, and I was really honored to be reading those words. But it was just so often, it was just like we're saying things that happened, like just saying things and events that actually took place, and you couldn't write it better.
Yeah, I mean, he had people stalking the liquor board members. He threatened to cut off beer sales at the Garden to spite the liquor board. He bans
Wild.
the Girl Scout mom. It is definitely stuff. If you're scripting a TV show, you're like, this is a little bit too much. Nobody's going to believe that this happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I should talk about, you were very complimentary of the writing, and Mike Meyer and Joe Hawthorne wrote most of it. And these things are very collaborative, right? These narrative limited series. You probably wrote your own stuff on Morning Edition, is that right?
Mostly, it was really collaborative too. Like there'd be some scripts that I would write entirely, and there'd be some scripts that a producer and or editor would write, and either we'd talk about it and make some changes, or sometimes it was just like a work of art that I would read on the air. So it was really, that's one of the beautiful things. And I think that it's like your crew is the same way. People have titles and stuff, but there are no egos. And if someone wants to take the initiative and has a great idea and wants to explore it, write something, and it's great, great. I love that kind of collaboration.
Yeah, it was a fun one to work on, and I know those guys were. We obviously sent you scripts saying change anything you want to because this is you're the one whose voice is going to be on this, and you had made some small changes, but for the most part, you seemed quite happy with the work they'd done. Like obviously there were, I'm sure, words that you wouldn't have used, or maybe I don't remember if we went a step too far in any jokes. If you're like,
I don't think so. It was really, because this was truly a learning experience for me. This was the first time that I'd come into a lengthy show that was pretty much written with an invitation to make changes. But I think it's really been important to me in my career as someone who really believes in collaboration to not change someone's work just for the sake of changing it and to make myself feel better. So I came into the project with that feel, and it was written so spectacularly well, finding that balance, telling a real story, but being entertaining, not overdoing jokes, but being funny. It was like, why mess with something that's just done really well? Just play the role and host it and honor the great pros, which I think that, to me, like when I talk to people about what makes great collaboration, that's a big part of it. It's like, get rid of your ego, work with a team, make the best product. And that includes not fucking with stuff that's someone else's work just for the sake of it.
well, I have to say, even though we didn't start with the idea of let's find a journalist, a news person to host this, in the end, I think it was perfect. I'm glad that this more sportsy people couldn't do it, or athletes, because I think it made it funnier having someone whose voice you identify with journalism and a more objective form of storytelling. It worked. I mean, obviously you're very talented on the mic and have a great voice, but also I think it made it, I don't know, it elevated it in a way that I don't think it would have been quite as good with say a sports world personality, or someone who's a little bit more known for being sarcastic, say.
Yeah. No, I really
even though I know you personally, you are quite a funny person and you are quite sarcastic, but that's not your public persona.
Yeah. No, and that was one of the things I really loved. You guys helped me push boundaries and bring, I think, that sarcastic side of my personality that my wife and friends know, but that the audience at NPR didn't know that well for a while, allowed me to test and experiment with that before an audience. It was just really fun to do that. So I loved having that chance.
And on the side, you were working on a decidedly unfunny project, right? Your Guns movie?
Yeah, we just premiered our film. It's called Louder Than Guns. And I'm very proud of it. I'm really grateful for all the people around the country who were willing to be vulnerable and talk. And I'm hoping that we can start a movement around it. It all came from a friend of mine, Ketch Secor, is the lead singer of Old Crow Medicine Show, Nashville band. They're a ton of fun. They're great. He wrote Wagon Wheel, which is probably you've sang at every karaoke bar. And after the Covenant massacre in Nashville, he was so broken as a father, as a Nashville resident, and he just thought about the front row at every one of his concerts, looking out there and thinking, like, I bet there are hardcore gun owners out there, and there are probably people who hate guns, and they're all standing there together, jamming to my music. Like, why can't they sit down together and actually, work some stuff out, stuff that politicians are not able to work out right now around ending gun violence. It goes beyond school tragedies. We spend time in parts of Chicago that are just rocked by gun violence and people really making that hard decision whether they want to purchase and train on firearms to protect themselves. Suicide is just such an awful cause of death for so many people in our country. I mean, from young people to old people and everywhere in between. And often it's a firearm. So we're just hoping that the film can show communities how to have a respectful, open-minded conversation with one another and start to work some stuff out and find solutions. And we're very deliberate about it not being a liberal-leaning or conservative-leaning movie. We really want everyone to have an on-ramp. So yeah, it's been a great project, and we hope it's just the beginning.
So you've premiered already. You're going to take it to festivals. What's the plan for it?
Yeah, we premiered at the Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival in Arkansas, which is it's the oldest, longest running doc festival in the U.S. Then we're going to do more festivals, and we're exploring distribution and working with a great impact producer to hopefully, do events, concerts around the message around the country. So we just want to make as much impact as we can in a really hard space.
Are you the narrator? Are you on camera?
I'm on camera. It's me and Ketch. It's a music film, we'd like to say, that goes surprisingly deep. The director's another friend of mine, Doug Prey, who's amazing. And that's kind of his ethos. Let's do a music film that draws people in. Similar to Reign of Air a little bit. Let's be compelling and entertaining, but actually go somewhere deep. This obviously goes much deeper into a really hard place, but it's let's all come around music as a window into a hard conversation. Ketch is performing with the band, and then he and I sit down with groups of people from all different perspectives on guns. So I'm on camera for those, the hard conversations that we have, and then there are interludes of some good old crow music.
Are you optimistic at all about progress on the gun conversation? I don't know. I feel so hopeless about it as an American. I wish I was not, but
yeah, I got cautiously optimistic after having all of these conversations. It's hard not to have some hope when you sit down with groups for a couple hours. I saw in Nashville a woman who lost her son in a Waffle House shooting be very honest with people at the table, gun owners, non-gun owners, just saying, I do not want to take your guns away. Like, as soon as my son was shot and murdered, gun owners assumed that I wanted to come for their guns. Like, I don't want to do that. I'm not judging people who own guns. I just want to be safe. I just want to stop this violence. And then the guy sitting next to me at the table at this Nashville restaurant came into the conversation like as hardcore a Second Amendment defender as you could imagine, owns AR-15s, and was just like, I just feel attacked as a gun owner. And now sitting here with all of you, I will admit that I'm open to things that make sense to me, that just, it's the stuff you don't hear in our politics. He's like literally saying, if you want to have a red flag law that makes someone in my family able to take my firearm away if I'm going through like a mental health crisis, he's like, I'm okay with that. Just let me own things that I have a right to. Agree or disagree, it was like having people at the table coming from such different places willing to talk. That gave me some bit of hope, but it's going to be a long fight.
What will happen first? Will Jim Dolan sell the Knicks, or will we have reasonable gun control in America?
I don't think Dolan's ever going to sell the Knicks. So if that, I feel good about the success of finding answers. Yeah, I don't know. It's like step by step. We want to start making a difference in tiny ways. I don't hold out much hope that Dolan's going to sell the Knicks. His ego's as big as that fucking sphere.
Especially if he wins the title.
Yeah. It's, yeah. Can you imagine the Rangers winning the cup and the Knicks winning the NBA title?
The same year?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
no. I suppose at that point, Knicks and Rangers fans are like, hey, we don't hate him as much as we did before.
Yeah, don't sell, man.
I definitely have to hear how January is when you're going to the Sphere. We got to check back in. We'll have to have a follow-up report in January.
Yes, I promise. I'm glad that we both confess that we want to be on the enemies list. That was a vulnerable place to go, and it makes me happy that you're in the same place.
I'm there. I'm going to test it at some point too. But let's start with you. So
yeah. Well, if you're free, you want to come go to the Sphere in January, let me know. We can do it together. But otherwise,
we might double our chances of They might be like, if you're alone, then maybe you get like a.
Yeah, but if these two guys are coming together.
If
with Girl Scout mom, if we bring her, like it's game over.
Ocean's 14.
Yeah. Exactly.
The Sphere. All right, man. Well, thanks so much. We're going to talk in January.
Sounds good. It's a date. You got it, Josh. Thanks, man.
Thanks so much to the great David Greene and the rest of the fearless Reign of Error team, and thank you for listening to Inside the Tent. If you haven't already, don't forget to go to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com.